This video is brought to you by Cardo. I'll tell you a little bit more about them later on in the show.
Guys, I have no idea what's in the water over in Austria, but somebody needs to go check on the people at KTM because none of their bikes can be normal. This thing is outrageous. You know, it's very rare that there's a motorcycle out there that is so just balls to the wall that if somebody were to ask me for a chiller motorcycle than this, that I would recommend an MT-09. That's how nuts this thing is. It makes the MT-09 look sane by comparison. So let's skip all the preamble and hit the road and talk about this absolute maniac of a motorcycle right here. And let's start off with where it's really meant to be, and that's the Twisties.
All right, out here on the Twisty Road with the 890, it is outrageous. That you're gonna hear that word a lot. It's crazy how quickly this thing darts from side to side. It carves the line every bit like the scalpel they advertise it to be. I'm blown away by how tight the handling is on this motorcycle. It is the most telepathic naked bike I've ever ridden. You think and it goes exactly where you want it to. And this is a motorcycle where you end up riding it a little bit faster than you might otherwise ride a naked bike because it just feels so confidence inspiring. The power on tap for your Twisty road ride in sport mode is delicious, and the torque is so broad that it really doesn't matter what gear. Man, it picks up the wheel everywhere. It really doesn't matter what gear you're in. There's just so much power being put down by this engine. It's nuts. It is a crazy potent weapon of a motorcycle, and we're out here on this road which has just spectacular pavement. It feels at home. And I was looking at the tires on this bike because this is used. It's got like 7,000 miles on, or 6,200 miles or something like that. This has definitely been on a racetrack, 100%. I was looking at the bubbles on the tires. This has been tracked for sure, and it makes a ton of sense. This would be so much fun on a racetrack. Now, one thing that's a particular standout here are the brakes. The brakes are so potent, almost too potent if you're not careful. You really need to just feed in a little bit of brake, and then once you do that, you can load it up and really work it. But if you just grab that front brake, you're gonna lose it, because it is, these two Brembos up there are so powerful. I mean, just watch this. We're going 60 miles an hour down to nothing. Like, we carved that in half. It's also really narrow between the knees. It's so narrow that you can really just manhandle the bike down. You can put your weight into your outside leg and just pull the bike down. It's a very connected way to ride on this bike. You feel attached to it. You feel like you're a part of it. And I love that. It really does also add to that telepathic riding feeling. I will also say, in terms of like twisty road and sporty ergonomics, the exhaust is kicking into my boot. If I try to put my toes up on the pegs like you're supposed to, my boot is riding on the exhaust, which doesn't seem particularly smart. I'm definitely going to end up scuffing the exhaust if I'm doing that, or melting my boot, which is just as bad. So, you know, that's not great, and it does mean that you have to ride it with your feet kind of down on the pegs, which isn't great either. Last thing I want to say here with regards to the power, this is one of the first bikes where I'm like, you definitely need street mode. Street mode really does make the bike a lot more normal, because in sport mode this thing is just all go no quit all the time, and it can actually be a little bit lurchy. It can be a little bit snatchy on and off. I mean, that kind of comes with the territory when you have this much torque and this low weight. So it's just something to note. You might find yourself switching into street mode more often than you might think. You might be one of those guys who's like, sport mode all day, every day. And you might find yourself using street. Now, as we approach the highway upon which I will film the highway segment, we should take a second before we get there to talk about the specs on this machine, because they are some pretty wacky numbers on this bike, and there's also a lot to talk about in terms of like and dislike. So let's pull over and have a little bit of a conversation.
So y'all may have noticed that there's a Cardo logo in the intros now, and that's because they are the newest partner for the channel. Cardo is the leader in motorcycle comm systems, and they have been my choice of helmet comms for years. I recently upgraded from my Pack Talk Slim, which has been on my helmet for about 5 years and has been a workhorse, to the Edge, which is their biggest and baddest, with DMC mesh, upgraded sound, and battery life. If you're wondering how Whitney and I talk when we're riding, it's all thanks to Cardo. Right now, until the 21st of February, you can get 22% off your order of any Duo pack, so you and a special someone can whisper sweet nothings in each other's ears as you ride. Just click that link down below. Alright, back to the show.
Jumping on into the specs on the KTM here, this thing is powered by the 889cc parallel twin with a 270-degree crank or thereabouts. They tried to tune it to mimic one of their V-twins, and personally, I'm not feeling that. It feels like a parallel twin, not a V-twin. Now, I did say this was fun. The reason it's fun, we have 121 horsepower, 73 foot-pounds of torque, 366 pounds wet and ready to ride. That is crazy to have that much power in a bike that weighs this little. It's no wonder it's a freaking wheelie monster. This thing is so much fun. It's so rowdy. The torque is so broad. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's not carrying around a ton of weight. The way this thing flicks side to side, it's unbelievable. And again, it's down to the weight. One problem I will point out with this motorcycle as I mount up on it here is the seat height is 32.8 inches. If you are on the short side, this is a very long reach to the ground. I have a 32-inch inseam, I'm 6'4", and even though I have a little bit of a bend in my knee, because the seat is so wide, I actually end up kind of having to reach for the ground a little bit. This is a very tall motorcycle, and it's also a very roomy motorcycle. For somebody my size, to have this much room to move around is awesome. However, again, if you're on the smaller side, that can be a bit of a bummer. And that leads me into my pros and cons on this bike. First of all, we gotta talk about the handling again. It's unbelievable. I honestly, this handles almost as well, if not as well, as the ZX6 that I rode. When you get it on a line, it just holds the line perfectly. It feels so good. It flicks side to side so fast, and a lot of that is down to the weight. However, while I'm goofing around, flicking it through corners, what I don't want to be doing is be distracted by the technology on here. And the quick shifter, it's definitely a bit of a bummer. You really gotta stomp the thing to make it go down and switch gears. And I think at this point that it's really just a KTM problem when it comes to quick shifters. I've had reports of 1290s not feeling very good with their quick shifters. My 690 was awful. And then this, it's definitely hopped out of gear a couple of times right around first gear. I don't love that, and I do need to shout it out. You can turn it off, but if I'm gonna pay $12,400 for this motorcycle, I don't wanna turn off the features so that I don't have to be annoyed by them. I just want them to work out of the box. One problem I will point out with the weight, because it is so light, it's easy for the rear tire to get squirrely on you. Yeah, it's fun when you're just like going through a corner and you can sort of let it step out. But it can also be a little bit nerve-wracking. You step on the quick shifter mid-corner and the whole bike just shudders underneath you as the bike, you know, the slipper clutch moves, and it just doesn't feel super planted if you're not even on the gas. You really gotta be even with your inputs, especially mid-corner, because this bike will get upset on you if you're not careful. Last thing I want to talk about here, this motorcycle costs you $12,400 for the R. You get your adjustable suspension, you get your TFT dash and all that cool stuff. But I'm also looking down at the grips, and these are the exact same grips that I had on my SMC-r, and those were the heated grips. If these are in fact the heated grips, that means that you have to go in and activate them, and that means you have to pay for it. I cannot verify online whether or not this is the case. However, you can buy the tech package on this motorcycle, and you can buy a whole bunch of electronic goodies that you can unlock on here. So I have to believe that these are the heated grips, and you can turn them on by going to your KTM dealership and forking over some cash. That sucks, man. That really, really sucks, because they're already on the motorcycle. I'm willing to be wrong, but if those are the heated grips and you gotta go pay to turn them on, that's a huge dinger in my book. Now, with all of that being said, let's get this thing out on the highway and see how it handles for your average daily commute.
Now, the highway manners were a pretty big question mark on this motorcycle for me. As a lot of you will know, I am coming from a KTM 690 SMC-r, which weighed about 360 pounds, and it was very, very touchy on the highway. It kind of like bounced and rattled because there was so much suspension travel, and it would speed wobble quite a bit. You know, you were just going down the road and, you know, maybe a car would pass you going really fast, and the wind blast would actually cause a little bit of a wobble in the handlebars. So when I was looking at this motorcycle, I was like, well, I wonder if it's heavy enough to be stable on the highway. And sure enough, yeah, it's pretty darn stable. I've had this motorcycle going pretty darn quick on the highway, and it's done an admirable job. I will say, while it tracks straight, I think a lot of that is down to the steering stabilizer that's on this motorcycle. If you can look down there, you'll see the steering stabilizer underneath the yoke of the bike there. And that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. It certainly is doing a lot of heavy lifting to keep this motorcycle stable. I've tried to throw a couple of speed wobbles just to see if I can induce one, and nope, it does the job. It keeps it going straight. But my question is, at what cost, you know? Because this motorcycle, it has a propensity to be caught by the wind. Let's see if it's got enough power to merge onto a Texas highway, though. Come on, come on, come on. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I think it's fast enough for a Texas highway, but as we're going over this bridge, back to my other point, this thing can be a bit of a sail. And there have been times when I've just been poodling down the highway, and on a windy day like today, I've caught a cross breeze and found myself, you know, suddenly riding, you know, at 30 degrees because it just wanted to blow itself over. When you're cruising on the highway, weight can actually be good for the riding experience. And so, like right there, I just felt a huge gust knock the bike around. It is also a bit of a bummer that we don't have cruise control on here. I would certainly have liked to have seen that on this motorcycle. Kind of a weird omission. And while we're talking about weird stuff, I don't really like the way that you have to go switch modes. You have to press set, you have to go down to ride mode, click set again, and then select it, and then click sport or street. That's too many button presses, especially while you're riding. If you only have 3 rider modes, just give me a mode button that cycles between them. having to menu dive while you're on the road, that's not good. I don't like that. In terms of actual comfort, I mean, the bike is fine. There's not any wind protection, and it can be a little bit exhausting in the seating position, but the seat is surprisingly comfortable given how wide and flat it is. The bars are in a great spot, and it is a very roomy motorcycle. So on the highway, I'd give this like a 6.5 because of the, you know, propensity to get blown around by the wind. Maybe a 7, but other than that, thumbs up. So let's pull this bike over now that we're hitting the traffic part of the afternoon and see what some of the folks over on Discord have to say about this motorcycle and see if we can't answer some of their questions.
Now this here's my favorite part of these reviews, and that's answering Discord questions. If you want to get involved and ask some questions about bikes that I'm reviewing, all you got to do is click the link down in the description below. Check out the Patreon. All of the information is there. Now let's dive on in with our first question from the Chazen. Why isn't it more orange? Honestly, it's pretty darn orange. It's really hard to not look at this graphics package and be like, yikes, that's a lot of orange. It is a very neon motorcycle for sure. And it's definitely one of those bikes where if you're not all about this colorway, it's not gonna get any prettier if you're sitting on it. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. T-Jeep DRV asks, how does it compare to the 790? Well, I haven't ridden a 790, but I can tell you that this thing is going to be faster, it's going to handle better, it's going to have better technology in it. This generally is going to be the superior motorcycle. However, I can say that this is a pretty roided out bike, and if you want something that's maybe a little less chaotic, then the 790 might be for you. Blauder asking the hard-hitting question, is it as rowdy as an MT-09? It's rowdier than an MT-09, man. This thing makes the MT-09 feel sane by comparison. I was not kidding at the top of the video when I said that. There are times when I'm riding this bike and I'm like, dude, why can't you just be more like an MT-09? Why do you have to be so aggressive? Orange asking a question that I touched on a little bit earlier, but I will touch on again, is can you feel/hear the 75-degree V-twin character that KTM tries to build into their parallel twins? You can sort of feel it, but every time I get on the throttle, it hits like a parallel twin. You know, V-twins have that nice savage bottom end where they just like, ugh, and then they sort of taper out a little bit towards the top. This parallel twin revs out exactly like the Yamaha parallel twin and exactly like every other 271 I've ever sat on. It's not a bad thing, it just doesn't feel like a KTM V-twin to me. Johnny Mish asking a good question here. How capable is the Duke in a cornfield? And has anybody already asked this? No, nobody has asked that. And he's referencing all of the photos that you see on Reddit of KTM 890s ending up on the side of the road because they're squidding a little bit too hard. It is the natural habitat for KTM squids, is the cornfield. Honestly, I can see why somebody would get a little bit too zesty on this motorcycle. It's so confidence-inspiring that you can easily override your ability on this motorcycle. And then, you know, you're just going around a corner and something surprises you, or you hit a gravel patch and whoop, there you go. Out into the cornfield you go. Dasco asking, how does it stack up against the new Monster and the rather sedate-seeming F900R? This is a much bigger motorcycle than the Monster, and it's got a lot more power than the Monster. I like the Monster, it's fun, but if you want to just go all out, balls to the wall, this is the way to go. It's also a lot more comfortable for a guy my size. Frost asks, since Moto America has it competing against the FTR and the Super Hooligan, does the Duke 890 compare to the FTR? Dude, these bikes are in such a different class. This thing is so much lighter, so much torquier, so much better handling, that the fact that they're on the racetrack at the same time is a little bit silly, I'm not gonna lie. These 890s are incredible motorcycles. And that's not to say that the FTR isn't. This is just way better. And with that, guys, I'm gonna wrap up the questions here and get this thing back out on the road for my final thoughts. And I honestly think that my wrap up might surprise you a little bit.
Now guys, this is another reason why I'm very happy about breaking these day in the saddles into 2 videos, with my first impressions being their own experience, because sometimes a motorcycle makes a really splashy first impression. You're just like, holy cow, why doesn't everybody ride one of these things? And then you spend a little bit more time with it, and you realize that it's not all it was cracked up to be in that first ride. And I think that's what we've got here with the Duke 890R. Now, I know how this is gonna sound, and I'm gonna say it anyway. I think that this motorcycle is more about cheap thrills than it is about anything else. Now, I'm not gonna say that this motorcycle is cheap, because it's not, and it's not built cheap either. It's a premium ride. But the thing that it does best is just, you know, kind of go fast. Everything else is pretty mediocre, honestly. You know, it's fine on the highway, but it's not great. In sport mode, it's a right handful to ride, and in street, it's a little better, but not significantly. And I know a lot of people are gonna say, well, just ride it in street mode then. But I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna ride it in street mode all the time when I'm, you know, if I were the owner of this motorcycle. I ride my Hyperstrada in sport mode 99% of the time. But sport mode is just, it's a freaking handful to ride. Like, this bike, more so than other ones that I've ridden, demands that you are singularly focused on the riding experience. And if you're not, it'll chew you out and spit you up. And in that sense, I really do think that this motorcycle is really for, you know, the like expert level, the enthusiast track day guy who's, you know, who's just wanting one bike that they can ride on track and off track, and all they care about, the only thing they care about, is going fast as they can. I want a little bit more out of my bikes, and this feels kind of like a one-trick pony to me. However, it's really good at that one trick. Holy cow, is it really good. Oh, it's such a fast bike. And it's fun to ride. Don't get me wrong, it's fun to ride. But in short stints. Like, I've been riding this thing all day long, and I want off this thing. I am done. It's like riding a roller coaster, you know? You don't want to ride a roller coaster all day long. You need some time to go get yourself some refreshments and, you know, the cheap corn dogs that you're gonna spit up when you go on the tilt-a-whirl. But you're not spending all day on one roller coaster. This is like spending all day on a roller coaster. It sounds great in theory, and then it becomes exhausting, and I'm tired. I'm tired of riding this motorcycle. And then you combine that fact with some of the weirdness, like how the quick shifter doesn't work all that great, and if you downshift, because it's so light, if you downshift mid-corner, the rear tire gets real wonky on you, and the bike kind of tends to judder and shake a little bit. And you get a motorcycle that's really not meant for street cruising. A lot of people use it for street silliness, but it's really clear to me that this is a track-focused motorcycle. Definitely feels like it's meant to live on stands and tire warmers and out on a racetrack, and not really not really out on the street. And that's totally fine. Some people like that experience, and it's just not for me. At least not right now. You know, if I were a track rat, maybe I would come back to this, because you'd be a lot more capable of doing multiple sessions, a long day on a bike like this, because you're not scrunched up into a ball. You're kind of upright. And there you have it, guys. This is a phenomenal motorcycle, and it handles like a dream, but it's really meant for a very specific rider, and I don't think that rider's me. So I will happily take this bike back to AF1 and hand them the keys and get back on my Ducati. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this look at the 890, and remember, if you are interested in everything this bike has to offer, click the link down in the description below and check out AF1, where you can pick yourself up this very exact motorcycle that I'm sitting on right here. Otherwise, bon voyage, mighty friend, and may you have many track days ahead of you. I will catch you guys in the next one. See you later.